gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for May 15th, 2023 for the next hour or so. Let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, the EU approves Microsoft's big acquisition and Zelda is good. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Patrick Klepek, everybody. Patrick, how are you doing?
I got 2.5 more weeks before I lose my job. I'm fucking kicking it, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for hanging out with me during these trying times.
These trying times. Love to have the last day of my job also be the day that my kid gets out of school. Just we're celebrating milestones in life.
Everyone's graduating and moving on to question mark. Yeah.
yeah. You know, maybe that'll be at one of my like hands-on meetings at Summer Games Fest. Is like look, you could check out Alan Wake 2, and then also there's a job around the corner. Like that's what I'm hoping for. So you know, we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, it's it doesn't seem like a great time to have to get out there and like hit the pavement, as they say, but I don't know. Like, I remember you saying, like, at this point in your career, everything's on the table, right? Because it's what there's no going backwards at a certain point in this industry. Like you kind of move up, and then you look around, like there's nowhere else to move up to, right?
It's tough, you know. I mean, I think there is a reason that you see, you know, folks like Jeff Green, like folks reach a certain age, and I regret to inform myself that despite the fact that I still look roughly 18 or 19, that I am approaching 40 and I'm 38 years old with two children, that, like, you know, you have certain obligations in your life. And at a certain point, like these jobs may not be able to provide that. And so I would say that I have a guaranteed severance, but I have seen some things this morning that make me wonder if that is 100% true. I will wait till those checks clear. But like, regardless, like there are certain pivot points in life, and I've been very lucky to make it 6 years. It'll be almost nearly 7 years by the time like my time wraps up at Waypoint and Vice on June 2nd. Right. And like That is an enormous amount of time to be at a media company. Like I used to have a reputation when I was younger that when there was any sort of like headline that says Patrick Klepek leaves place, it's like, oh, because that place is about to implode or go under sometime in the near future. Because I was constantly job hopping because it was the only way to get a reasonable salary increase to sort of like get yourself out of the time bomb that is like a media company that is probably going to implode or have a leadership change or like something that is going to just make your job difficult. And at a certain point, like you do that sort of like that hopping, you get to a certain point of life and it's like, look, I would love it if like Polygon had called me up and was like, hey, like, here's the thing. It's like, I regret to inform you, like, no such offers really exist right now. Like, it is a difficult market for everybody, even the places that are doing well, like, things are tight. And so all of a sudden you start looking at, well, I've talked a lot of shit about Activision Blizzard, but a director of editorial with a salary that starts at $130,000 and is remote. Well, I just don't know. I just think I'm so glad the EU has decided to push along this acquisition.
Turns out that money is still green. What the hell? Oh, yeah, it's rough, right? Exactly. Like it's so, man, and you're right. The timing is kind of bad across the board. I mean, it's not just on the media side. We I occasionally have conversations with people on, games are doing pretty well, but like peripherals were really hot all throughout the pandemic. And it's like, you talk to those companies, like, everything's kind of rough over here right now. It's like, yeah, these companies struggle to plan ahead, and some of them really struggle to plan ahead. I did see that headline of where's the New York Times, Vice files for bankruptcy. Whenever you think of bankruptcy, it's like there's the pecking order of who gets their money, and it's like, oh, this creditor's up here, and then this company's like way down here, and they're going to get 10% of what they're owed, and it's like, where's Patrick Klepek on that pecking order, right?
I don't know. We're waiting for a follow-up meeting to find out, Jeff. I mean, I'll be okay. Like, I will figure it out. I think other folks have lamented this in the past, though, that like I do face this real sort of existential sort of fork in the road of like, I am not concerned about my ability to find a job, provide for my family. I am concerned that I am hitting a fork in the road on my ability to like continue being a reporter and like do the kinds of stories that have made me happy and successful in the past. Like, is it still possible to do that while providing for my family, paying them for like putting down money for things like college in the future for those kids? And can I do that under this existing model? That's the question that I don't have answers to. And my hope is that if the severance checks come through, I will have, and we can talk about this at the end when we talk about sort of some of the stuff I'm getting up to. Like, are there some things I can patch together that sort of allow me to do that in a different way? I'm still working through some of those options. And my hope was that, like, can I have a summer of Patrick where it's like I've got the buffer of severance to try a couple of those, see if they kind of piece together, because I don't know that, the New York Times will write about Zelda, but they won't hire a games reporter. And so it's like just the sorts of places that I would kind of go to at this stage in my career. I got to say that like things like consulting, like writing a review of like the next like Dead Space is paying a lot less than consulting for EA on whatever they're spinning up for Dead Space 2. And so I'm hoping to not go down that route. But, I'll have to see where I'm at when the end of the summer rolls around.
Exactly. At a certain point, like, choices become pretty slim, and you gotta do what you gotta do. And it's like, maybe the secret's gonna be finding out ways to do what's next in a way that you're happy with. Because like I'm like when I like look at that possibility, it's like, oh man, I kind of put myself in a real rut where I'm like, I kind of need to be doing these things to feel pretty satisfied in my job. And it's like, oh man, if that went away, what do I do? So. Yeah, it's a tough road to hoe now, and I don't know, we'll see what's next, but we'll definitely talk about what you're up to there at the end. In the meantime, let's get on with the mess and explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with the EU clears acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft, but it's subject to conditions. This comes from the EU directly. The European Commission has approved, under the EU merger regulation, the proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. The approval is conditional on full compliance with commitments offered by Microsoft. The commitments fully address the competition concerns identified by the Commission and represent a significant improvement for cloud gaming as compared to the current situation. That last line there, Patrick, do you think they're like calling out the UK at all? Because the UK's whole thing was the cloud gaming thing is going to blow up if this deal goes through. And the EU's like, well, we got them to agree to a bunch of stuff that makes it even better. But do you think that's just coincidence, or do you think they're like poking at the UK at all?
Yeah, I don't know. That's I'd have to know a little more about the relationship between like these two regulatory agencies and whether they have a history of tussling. Also, this is like post Brexit, in which I'm sure the dynamics between these two are like regulation is politics, right? And so it would not shock me if the EU, which was certainly not a fan of the Brexit vote, was hoping that they would stay within the EU, would be looking to marginalize like the UK and like, look, like you want to go down this path, like this is a great way to make that horrifying like Bobby Kotick quote about being like, I guess the UK is just not I guess people are, if they don't let us like make Call of Duty exclusive in 10 years, which we're clearly going to do, then I guess line up at the poorhouse and get ready for your bread. I mean, like that was the way the threat sounded from Kotick in those quotes. And so I wouldn't be surprised there's a little bit of like politics happening here of trying to marginalize their opinion that the UK sort of landed on. But I don't know enough about like the specifics between those two groups to know whether like can these sorts of write-ups be changed? Like how often does like drafts and edits occur? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I don't know how late in the process things like that can happen. But I would not be shocked if that was essentially a petty lob at the commission, if anything, to sort of like join the sort of global forces that seem to be pushing in the direction of moving this deal. I don't know what's going to happen with the FTC. They're more or less like the last major player. I think if the EU had decided against the deal, the FTC almost certainly would have gone full-throated against it because there'd be nothing to lose. It just would have been a smart move for them as an organization. But what happens here now, I don't really know.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, there's still the UK is still a question. Like, they're appealing the decision, and we've talked about that previously, like what that appeal looks like and how it seems from the outside pretty hopeless for Microsoft in terms of that. But then Microsoft could have other considerations of maybe working around the UK and saying the deal doesn't actually exist in the UK, but everywhere else it goes through. There's options on the table for Microsoft. None of them are very good. But yeah, the FTC continues to be a big question because that is a lawsuit that is coming and won't even begin until August or something like that, which is
Right.
beyond the deadline that they set for themselves, something that they will definitely renegotiate with between Activision and Microsoft, but to kick that can down the road. But it's like, yeah, and I think the FTC will probably be like, okay, the UK is the one that we knew we can maybe get on our side a little bit, and we're just going to keep throwing bows and just trying to keep getting in the way and stop this deal. So the EU, a big regulatory body, kind of the infamous or famous for being the one that like is the strictest and the one that is most likely to cause these deals to disintegrate. Although the UK is maybe beginning to take that reputation on a little bit more after the Nvidia ARM deal went down because of them as well. So, but this deal does. You're right. The global pressure does seem to be pushing it in the direction of closing. And the UK, or I'm sorry, the EU in its decision here explained why they kind of went through with it. And there's some interesting tidbits. I guess we'll talk about some of the things that they found when they did their investigation. Microsoft would have no incentive to refuse to distribute Activision's games to Sony, which is the leading distributor of console games worldwide, including in the European Economic Area, where there are 4 PlayStation consoles for every Microsoft Xbox console bought by gamers. Indeed, Microsoft would have strong incentives to continue pushing games onto PlayStation. Even if Microsoft,
no is a strong word, Jeff.
Yes,
no is an extremely, that is a binary word. That is, yeah.
Agreed.
I would say Microsoft has incentive to
Definitely.
refuse. Would they? I don't know that they would do that in the short term. I don't know that I would argue they have no incentive.
Clearly.
I could take away a major financial driver of my competitor. And would it also hurt me? Yes, but arguing there is no incentive is, I don't know.
And that was Microsoft's language early on. It always felt like, are you sure you want to? Because we all know how this works. I mean, yeah, we get it. You would have, you would like you said, it would hurt you too. But you would still have some incentive, just like there was the incentive to do that with the Bethesda games, which you have said you're going to do and you're going to continue doing. Like, you're not going to go back on that. And it's like there was definitely math done there. I saw some of that math from internal documents where they're like, yeah, we are going to treat this as an investment in Game Pass, and that's how we're sort of going to justify the reduced amount of revenue we're going to get from not selling games on PlayStation. And when we look at that math, that incentive is clear. But it's like, okay, in this case, maybe the incentive isn't clear, but it's still there. So and 10 years from now, when these deals do, expire, things could be completely changed, and that incentive could shift dramatically. So yeah, I don't get why the European Commission adopted the no incentive language of Microsoft.
Yeah.
Let's see. Even if Microsoft did decide to withdraw Activision's games from the PlayStation, this would not significantly harm the competition in the console market. Even if Call of Duty is largely played on console, it is less popular in the European Economic Area than other regions of the world. And they also basically said Sony could then leverage its abilities to create games, to create something that would be competitive in that position. Even without this transaction, Activision would not have made its games available for multi-game subscription services, as this would cannibalize sales of individual games. This seems to be a big point for the EU and kind of covers a lot of the other stuff they talk about, where it's like, when we look at the status quo of what Activision would be doing with Call of Duty, things under Microsoft will either be equal or better. And that leads into how they feel about cloud gaming. It's like a lot of the deals we made are better now and much better according to them. But the way that they describe how this is going to work, Patrick, is a little confusing to me. I'll go through it here. So the way that they're addressing the competition concerns identified by the commission in the market for the distribution of PC and console games via cloud gaming streaming services goes as such. Gamers will get, at least this is preferred, 10-year duration. Gamers will get a free license to consumers in the EEA, the European Economic Area, that would allow them to stream via any cloud game streaming services of their choice all current and future Activision Blizzard PC and console games for which they have a license. So I think what they're saying is, if you buy the game anywhere, you will then get a portable license that you could take with you to any streaming service. How does that work?
Right. I guess, in some ways this is some of the stuff that you were running into with like GeForce Now, right? Where it's like, and once, in one sense,
Right.
it was a technology they were just unlocking, which is like, hey, we're just going to let you take the games you own, use Steam as an authentication tool, and then you can play them remotely. And then, a bunch of developers were like, hey, like, wouldn't we like to charge for the right to have cloud added on? And like, we don't view this as just like a tech add-on. And here, this just seems to sort of move in that direction of like, look, you've bought the game. Once you have the game, you can just spin it up wherever you'd like, which is nice. I in theory, that is, a direction I would like, games to be in, where you can purchase a license in one place, and then, you've already paid the money. Just let me play it however I'd like to play it, wherever I'd like to play it, which is in theory like an extension of what already makes things like the PC like really enjoyable, and the cloud just moves that onto a more device agnostic situation. So in theory, that sounds great, but also like that. What does free license to use on other platforms mean? I mean, that sounds like work for other platforms to then do to support
what
it.
I was thinking, right? Because it doesn't cost them money to support that. If I buy it on my Xbox, and then I get that license, and then I take it to NVIDIA. I suppose NVIDIA's got, like, you have to pay to use NVIDIA's streaming service, but I guess maybe some of them might not have that upfront payment or that monthly, like, okay, I'm going to be able to access this stuff. Wouldn't it just be like bandwidth costs for them? But I guess this is stuff they will probably figure out. And it seems like, according to the EU, that the competitors in the cloud space that they talked to were all very much in favor of this idea. So they probably have some solution in mind. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the details are like the devil's in the details on this, and there's a world where this ultimately still more or less plays into Microsoft's hands, because like, okay, look, we offered up a free license, but it turns out like the easiest, cheapest way to do cloud gaming is still on Microsoft's platforms, because we're going to bundle it, with the games that you get as part of the subscription, and yada yada yada. And so it's like, yeah, you could do it somewhere else, but like, why would you? I think places like GeForce Now are excellent, and like, if you haven't used any of these services, yes, they do require like high-end internet speeds, but like they can work remarkably well. But I expect those are mostly going to be sort of like niche markets. Like, how many people are going to sign up for GeForce Now relative to spinning up something that would be on their Xbox or PlayStation?
It was really good during the pandemic when people couldn't get PC hardware because it was all sold out or way too expensive. GeForce Now was an easy recommendation, and now it's like, well, you can get a PC kind of dirt cheap right now if you know where to look. Okay, is this sort of agreement reminiscent of that time when Nintendo got in trouble and their solution was like, we'll put a $5 coupon for Nintendo stuff in every magazine, meaning people have to go spend money on Nintendo stuff, where it's like, oh yeah, we will make all these concessions to cloud gaming, because in the end, a lot of these cloud companies are going to come and do their stuff on Azure, and so we're going to get money one way or the other out of this.
I mean, yeah, that's that. On Waypoint Radio, which still exists for another 2.5 weeks. We
ride or die. I'm ride or die with that.
I mean, it's why I understood in my initial response to the UK's argument hinging entirely or mostly on the cloud argument feeling flimsy, but at the same time, I was sympathetic to the broader argument, more just like philosophically, like even less just about this specific situation of like, Microsoft owns the stack. They own a hardware stack for like the box they sell you. They own the server stack for the cloud stuff. And then if they start owning the game stack for like the assets that are on there, like anytime something is costing like, what is this deal? $69
billion.
Yeah, right. It's like, I sort of on principle, I sort of think like $69 billion deals shouldn't exist. Like if we are purchasing things at that scale, almost inherently there are going to be anti-competitive elements to it. And so I don't necessarily agree that like, gee, if the cloud market is not allowed to thrive, then like video games might be doomed.
Yes.
But like I can arrive agreeing with that argument if it is like, look, does it seem likely that is going to be, if you did an analysis, does it seem likely that's going to be like take over video games as a market? Probably not, but it could, right? Like, it is not out of the realm of possibility that cloud suddenly became like a really important player.
Yes.
And do we want to live in a world where Microsoft more or less like becomes the predominant player in that, in the same way that they were for Windows as a like as a hardware operating system or software operating system in the 90s. No. And so I don't agree with the argument, but philosophically agree broadly with like why they would say this just doesn't feel right. As a society, we shouldn't be letting deals like this happen. Just go buy EA or something. do what Sony did and like bought Bungie. Like in these couple of years, you could have bought 3 different companies that gave you a bunch of IP that nobody would have blinked at.
Yeah, and I think they are. Activision was like the exact right target to get around those philosophical concerns, because I think everybody has that immediate gut reaction of Microsoft's huge. Them acquiring a $69 billion or a company for $69 billion just seems on its face a bad idea. And then we look at Activision, it's like, that's already kind of really bad over there. Like they already suck in terms of having a toxic workplace. They already suck at not making very many video games. The stuff that they are making, they're double down on Call of Duty, and they have already kind of run out of like runway on that stuff. And now
just
they're
let them crumble.
Yeah.
Like the sort of like divestment that like a lot of these regulatory bodies were asking Microsoft to sort of do to justify the acquisition. I think we're on the maybe not this year, next year, but 5-10 years, like the writing was on the wall for where that company was going. And there's an entire reason they agreed to this, and Microsoft pounced on their certain price, was that it was just a sweet spot at a company in a weak moment in which they've had really good success with Call of Duty. But I'm just not I'm not confident they can replicate that over the course of the next 10 years. And that is more or less all they're looking at. And Blizzard, who, I think is still capable of making quality products, and Diablo 4 is going to be like a big deal this year. They work at a time scale that is slower, riskier, and the company has all of its own sorts of problems. And it's not the machine that it used to be in terms of bringing out quality games. And I'm sure all these policies they're having about forcing people to work from the office, and they're shedding talent, that is going to have huge ramifications that we don't feel now for these games, but we do feel for the games that will be coming out 3, 4, 5 years from now. And all that seems to add up to a company that has a very rickety foundation, and that would be kind of divesting itself to some degree at some point down the line.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And I always, like, when I was looking at this entire time, it's status quo is already pretty bad. We're it's a bad place to work. It's all this stuff. But why is the solution letting Microsoft buy it? That's not really a solution. It's not really going to fix a lot of those fundamental things. Maybe they'll make a handful more video games because the incentives behind a Game Pass are a little bit different. And maybe they are more worried about regulators than Activision previously was. So they're going to be a little bit more kids' gloves with things like unions and things like that. Things we've already heard them commit to. But that doesn't mean it's going to suddenly turn into a vibrant market. All the vibrant market stuff is happening outside of Microsoft and outside of Activision already. It is in places like Steam and early access, and it was mobile for a while, although not so much anymore. But there's still incredible ideas coming out of nowhere all the time in video games. So it's still a pretty healthy place, and but it's that way despite whatever's happening with Microsoft and Activision. And they are sort of all the stuff they're doing is like, okay, yeah, I don't think this is going to change much one way or the other, and I don't think it's going to enable Microsoft really to have some dominance on the market. It's just not. Call of Duty's big. But
they bought a lot of companies before this, and it hasn't made much of a difference so far.
Exactly.
And so I don't think that can necessarily be taken as a given in terms of not even just like market dominance, but just an ability to publish like high quality games on a regular basis, and even things that in theory probably made more sense a couple of years ago, like it's King, right, that Activision also owns, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the sale that Sega, the purchase Sega's making for Rovio, the Angry Birds developers, like that looks like a fucking bargain compared to what Microsoft is proposing to pay for King. The way, and some of this is like the free money that was floating around during COVID, like a bunch of the investment money has collapsed in the last couple of years, but the premium they are paying for a mobile company's resources, which is I think an overlooked part of like what they are purchasing, like in this agreement, they're wildly overpaying for King now. Like I think it's just so many parts of this. Like it's a save face. They have the money. Like Microsoft's an enormous like they can afford to overpay for King, but like there's just so many parts of that. There's like they can't back away from it. They have to just be forced to back away from it if that's where this all ends up. But it all feels exceptionally silly at this point.
Yeah, I think King's been a little bit surprising about how the longevity that its games have, and that doesn't even like begin to do it justice. Like I remember looking at the mobile market in 2012, be like, all right, Candy Crush Saga at the top, and it's been at the top ever since for more than a decade straight. And it's like, okay, so there's some stagnation in the mobile game space, but there's at least a couple companies that have figured out how to cash in on that consistently all this time. And you know, for Microsoft, like I think they are overpaying for this deal, but that money is just sitting in their bank account, depreciating in value, and they don't know where to put it. I'm sure they have a bunch of investments all over the place, but gaming companies continue to be like, especially ones that are like actively churning in profits, like a King. Where it's like, God, that is better than going and getting an 8% return on, you know, an S&P 500. You know, going and buying that. It's like, no, we'll just get a 15% return from King way more consistently, and that's a good use of that money for them. All right, let's move along here. Let's get to the Zelda segment of the show. According to the UK charts, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is the biggest boxed launch of 2023. This comes from Ollie Reynolds at Nintendo Life. The latest box charts are in for the UK, and to no one's surprise, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom comfortably sits at the top. According to Chris String from GamesIndustry.biz, the latest Zelda entry from Nintendo is the biggest box launch of 2023 so far, beating out Hogwarts Legacy by 54%. It also beat out its predecessor, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, by a staggering 173%, and it's already the fourth biggest Zelda game of all time in revenue. That's not just like for the launch period, that's for the entirety of those games' runs, it is the fourth largest already. It's not the biggest Switch launch of all time, however. That honor still belongs to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but it's like right in there. And I think in terms of revenue, it's actually ahead of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because it's $70. Of course, since Nintendo doesn't share digital data, we're not really getting a complete picture of how the game has done at launch. But if the box sales are anything to go by, we have a hunch that Tears of the Kingdom might become the best-selling Zelda game of all time sooner rather than later. If it does track with along like Hogwarts Legacy, which is a game that's already hit like 15, 20 million copies sold. Like that is very, very fast for a Zelda game, for any game. But it's also not too surprising, right?
No, and I would expect that that Tears of the Kingdom has a much longer tail than Hogwarts Legacy. And not that Hogwarts hasn't continued to sell all right in the months since, but that was a very much a front-loaded game that was I think a pent-up demand from an audience that had not seen a decent attempt at a game in that universe basically ever. Some of the early EA ones were
that Chamber of Secrets game is one that everyone always plays.
Yeah, I remember that being one that it was okay, but you know, I mean, and again, not trying to brush aside, you know, all the complications of that game, but purely as sort of like a product and who would, you know, appealing to a broader audience. I think that was very front loaded because there was a pent up interest in it. And there is that here as well. But I think as we saw with Breath of the Wild, like that game didn't sell 30 million units overnight. That was something that was a long tail over the course of many years. And I think that is going to prove to be the case with Tears of the Kingdom as well. And this game's, it's an incredibly complex, not particularly user-friendly game, and its ability to penetrate the normies is shocking. Like my neighbors are playing it, and I played through the opening area. That I was like, this game is like a lot for my brain at the moment. And I mean, I'm not going through a lot, but like these are people who like play a handful of games each year, almost never finish them because that's just how most people operate that aren't broken like you and I or the rest of the people watching this. But that game has just it is more than just a game. It's an event. It's like people are buying it because their friends are playing it. They are playing it because their friends are talking about it. And that is rare. That is rare air for any kind of game. And so for it to come this far into the lifespan of the Switch, and I think the $70 part is irrelevant. I don't think anyone blinked at that. It was, and I won't be shocked if Nintendo broadly doesn't charge $70 for more or less anything other than like this is our last squeeze of the Switch before the lights go out. So yeah, none of that is shocking to me because I have been increasingly just shocked in my own life how many times I'm hearing from just people that I wouldn't be asking me a question about a game. Are asking like, hey, like, how do I do this in Zelda? I was like, why are you playing? Okay, I guess everyone's playing Zelda, even you.
Yep. I mean, and Zelda was never really on that trajectory. I think it felt like at the time of Ocarina of Time, where it's like, oh, that and Metal Gear Solid are these games that like everyone's playing. It's like, oh man, if you look back, those numbers and that time gaming was so much smaller and such so minuscule compared to what it's become. And then Breath of the Wild does come along, and that is a game that has sold. It's right on the cusp of, actually just had a big bump because of Tears of the Kingdom. It is probably now over 30 million copies sold. And any game that is 30 million copies is it's a phenomenon. It's culturally relevant that like everyone has to sort of get on it for it to sell that much. Anything sort of above 20 million is really in that range. 30 million is kind of on the whole other tier.
I can't imagine this is the only instance that this is happening. I imagine this is fairly commonplace. Like one of my friends, he wasn't playing a Switch all that much. His kids were getting older, and so his kid kept borrowing his Switch, and so he basically just gave his Switch to his kid and was like, well, at some point that new Zelda will come out, and I'll just borrow it, and then I'll play the new Zelda. Well, now the kid considers that Switch to be his Switch. Like kids in middle school, like you're not getting that back. And so Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and he buys a brand new Switch just to play Tears of the Kingdom. And I just can't imagine I imagine that's happening all over the place. Like, I think there is like this far along, like the Switch has become sort of a family hand-me-down device that, you know, between like OLED models, Switch lights, kids getting older, pandemic, like there is something very unique and specific to the Switch itself and how it is used and represented in a household that I think allows it to have a game like this penetrate like even deeper and more explosively than we would normally see for kind of a traditional AAA game.
Yeah, and I mean that's something Nintendo tried to facilitate and push in the past with, hey, here's the Game Boy Color, here's the DSi, here's the new 3DS. You should buy. You're the person that gives us money for a console. The other people in your family aren't, but if you want to give them your old thing, we'll sell you something new, and we kind of keep that churn happening. I think what they found out with the Switch, and the reason we didn't get like a Switch Pro, is that stuff was just happening naturally with the Switch because so many people were interested in the household, and there were such a breadth of games, and indie games really came into their own, and like, you know, Hades was such a huge thing for the Switch, and it's like other people in the family just began using it, and the person that gave the money for the console was like, I'll just get another one. That happened. I think you're exactly right. And I think the Zelda OLED Switch model was designed to really play to that, and it's going to be pretty successful. They want to sell 15 million Switches this year. They sold about 18 million last year. A system in its 7th year selling 15 million consoles is pretty impressive. We'll see if they actually get there, but I think with this game doing the way it is, they're maybe well on their way to actually getting to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Milestone. Let's see here. Okay. Report: Tears of the Kingdom director already has plans for the next Zelda. This comes from Ethan Gach at Kotaku. 6 years after The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, its direct sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, is finally in the hands of Switch owners. So obviously there's no better. This is the worst thing we do in gaming, Patrick. Hundreds of people, and Ethan's going to mention this in the story too. So I'm not like picking on Ethan. Been hundreds of people spent 6 years working on a game that's bigger than anything we've ever played before. And we are immediately like, all right, what's next, baby? Go get back in the mines and make me more Zelda. Basically, the story just goes on to say that they do have some ideas, and they're like pretty excited to kind of get right back in there. But when asked like, hey, what does it look like? Is the framework going forward going to be Breath of the Wild? Aonuma said, with Ocarina of Time, I think it's correct to say that it did kind of create a format for a number of titles in the franchise that came after it. But in some ways, that was a little bit restricting for us. While we always aim to give players the freedoms of certain kinds, there were more certain things that format didn't really afford in giving people freedom. Of course, the series continued to evolve after Ocarina of Time, but I think it's also fair to say that now that we've arrived at Breath of the Wild and the new type of more open play and freedom that it affords, yeah, I think it's correct to say that it has created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from. Also, not very surprising, right?
Yeah, I mean, they also sound excited to work. You should want the developers that make the games that you like, and even if you don't like, you know, I'm certainly I'm not a Zelda traditionalist. I mean, they should make the games that make them excited to make. Sure. But like, you know, even playing Breath of the Wild is like, gee, I wish there were more dungeons in this game that I respect more than I love. But I love the fact that the friends that do adore it as much as they do. And so far, at least, like Tears of the Kingdom is a little more a mixture of both. I think it has a little more direction than Breath of the Wild did if you were looking for that. But yeah, I mean, it's some of the beauty of the Zelda franchise is that it's so unique in video games that you have a lot of the same principal characters having worked on this franchise for literal decades. And so they can think with such a long view on what excites them, what excites development teams, what excites the audience, like what excites an audience over like literal generations, right? Like, they are able to think, look back, draw from just such a rich well of history that, I mean, I think anyone that like grew up playing these games, like as I did, like, look, I know Twilight Princess has its fans. I'm hoping that at some point they'll actually do that re-release so that that's the one mainline Zelda game I have not finished because I bought it when the Wii came out and went, well, this seems boring.
I didn't
and
finish it because I was into it, and then my Wii got stolen, and then I couldn't get back into it. It was terrible.
I don't have that excuse. I thought the game was boring, and so I didn't keep playing it past like the first 2 dungeons. But I've always wanted to have a chance to kind of, if not reappraise it, like at least like close the loop on that and get a better sense of it. But I do think even folks who enjoyed that game could look at that game and go, huh, I think you can see that they are straining to come up with new ways to work within the structure that Ocarina of Time set for themselves. And that the Breath of the Wild allows for a new, exciting framework for them to just build out. Like, I mean, even as big and as expansive as Tears of the Kingdom is, you don't spend 6 years building a game without cutting a bunch of things that you didn't have time for or want to do, or came up with ideas that weren't feasible within the time frame. Even as much as 6 years might seem like an infinity, I am sure that is the case, because it's the case with every game that is made. And so, I'm sure they probably have a better idea than they are letting on for what they are working on next. And I am excited to see, like, if these are the lessons you learned from Breath of the Wild, what are the lessons you learned from Tears of the Kingdom? Because it only seems to get more interesting, intricate, and expansive, and frankly more complicated in a way that is very different than the kind of things that Nintendo traditionally build. Like, we don't really associate, not that I love platformers and there's nothing simple about them, but they're a little more straightforward and a little less fussy than what they are doing with the Zelda games. And like, the Zelda games are closer to a Minecraft and a Fortnite than anything else that Nintendo creates. And I'm just excited to see them keep pushing in that direction, because it is just kind of wholly unique for the company to be making something with that sort of angle. And so I can't wait to see what they do next.
I think it's somehow like Nintendo has gained a certain amount of belief in the player, one that they had not had for like a good solid decade there, from the Wii, DS era, where it's like, the Zelda games were a great example. They would stop you every 10 seconds to teach you every little thing, and the Mario and Luigi games got really drowned in that stuff as well. It's like it was really frustrating. I think Nintendo has found a belief that gamers have become more savvy overall. I do think it's like due to stuff like Fortnite, and really I think they could see it. And the 2D Super Mario Brothers games used to sell way better than the 3D ones, and now that's flipped. Now we haven't had a brand new 2D Mario game in some time. Maybe that will just skyrocket and be way more popular than Odyssey. But Odyssey is at like 25 million copies sold, way better than any other Mario game since like Super Mario Brothers. And so it's like, okay, clearly people are ready for 3D gaming. That's more complicated. And then when it comes to Zelda, a series has always been slightly more complicated than Mario. It's like, well, maybe like let's like lean into that. And when they did, they had huge success. And I think they did it in a way that was like very Zelda-like, where they had these the dungeons where you get the new items, and then you're supposed to realize how to use the items in the dungeon to solve the puzzles. They just took that idea and made the whole game about like, here's some tools. I want you to have one revelation after another every 10 minutes while you're playing this game about what you can do with them. And to me, that's like, okay, they understood what Zelda was better than anyone else. And like what you said, they've been working on it for decades, which almost gave me chills to think about. Like, these people have been my entire life been working on a series to entertain me. And they've really, the amount of consideration they put into it is evident on the screen, and the games just keep getting better. And Tears of the Kingdom is more evidence of that as well.
Yeah, and they're just letting me stack logs together and try and climb them, even though that's not what I should be doing. And I can't seem to climb those logs very well, but I'm still trying to do it because I don't know what else I should do to get up to that cliff. So
it's an immersive sim, right? They made an immersive sim, and no series or no genre makes me feel dumber than immersive sims, where it's like, I know they have created some amazing, elegant solution to this, and here I am just building stairs yet again, more stairs.
It has been my favorite part of these like opening days of people playing the game is people sharing like, oh, I'm such a dumbass. This is how I solved this, and then everyone going like, yeah, me too, man. Like, yeah, I'm a dumbass too.
I made the longest bridge you've ever seen yet again. And it's like, yeah.
There was I think one of my favorites was in the opening sky area of Tears of the Kingdom. There is like you get access to these mine carts, right? And then there's one area where there's like a break in the track. And so I don't need to go into what I did. I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't played it, but like I saw one person like tweeting, they were like, man, I couldn't figure it out. So I just tiptoed for 5 minutes across like the tracks, which you are clearly not supposed to do. Like if you were like in one false step, like Link falls and does not grab it, you just fall off, and they just
so
tiptoed across. And I'm like, that's dedication to just not like head empty,
I
like
love it.
no ideas.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and the game allows you to do that. You go in there, be the himbo Link that we all need to be. All right, let's get this next one, get through this Zelda segment. Eiji Aonuma interested in a Zelda movie after Mario's $1 billion box office success. Yeah, duh. Liam Doolin from Nintendo Life. The Mario movie by Illumination managed to bank more than $1 billion at the box office in just 26 days, seemingly opened the door for other movies set within the Nintendo universe. So how about a Zelda movie? In a recent interview with Polygon, producer Eiji Aonuma was asked if a big screen adventure starring Link could happen in the future. He said, I have to say I am interested for sure, but it's not just me being interested in something that makes things happen, unfortunately. Fujibayashi, who's the director of the game, incredible director, said maybe the voice of the fans is what's important here. Basically saying, hey, if you want a Zelda game, ask for it. I think we've been asking, or a Zelda movie, excuse me. I think we've been asking for that for a while. We'll see if they get around to that, which after the Mario movie, they are just going to begin pumping these out, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I that would be the normal approach, but I will be curious to see the pace at which they actually do the media expansion stuff. I know that was definitely like all the headlines out of like Hollywood when the movie was making bank, but that's not what Nintendo has historically done, is not respond to a trend or like a success and go, time to do 1 million more of those. In fact, they are often conservative to a degree that like makes everyone question what's going on with them. And so, you know,
the current president, very, very conservative, even compared to previous Nintendo presidents.
Right. Like, and so people tweet now like the Nintendo Cinematic Universe is about to begin. I was like, I don't know, man. I think they probably make a Donkey Kong movie that comes out in 3 years.
Yeah.
And we might not hear about
movie seems possible as well. Yeah.
I feel like, I feel like that's where we're going with this, is like spin out of the Mario sort of stuff. I don't know how quickly we're going into a Metroid film or a Zelda film. I also think those just don't necessarily have the scale and appeal that Mario does. Mario is pretty singular in terms of the like the appeal that it has to like generations of audiences, and Zelda's just like a hard, like how you do that as a movie is just like is trickier, right? Like you can't lean on the humor in the same way, going like the grimdark route. I just feel like those things might happen. Those conversations are occurring. I think in the short term, though, people should just be ready for like Seth Rogen to star in his own film in a couple of years.
I think I'm definitely. I mean, they've been laying it down thick with Donkey Kong as well, right? Where it's like,
why was he in that movie if not to then lead if to lead his own thing at some point?
I mean, if there is another reason he was in there, it is because they have the ride coming out at Universal, and they might have a Donkey Kong game that they're trying to promote, or something. But there's a lot.
It's a 10-year plan. Like, yes, I think that is all born out of that stuff. There's folks, like I thought there was a quote that was like, how involved was Miyamoto in Tears of the Kingdom? It's like, not particularly because he was so involved in the movie. It's like, hey, do you really think he was just sitting around like critiquing like the animation and shots for the last couple of years? Like, I think there is I don't think Miyamoto's going anywhere, tomorrow, but I think there's a real sense of like trying to set up the foundation and legacy of this company.
Yeah, and that's happened on the game side, where he has raised a generation of developers like Fujibayashi and Aonuma, obviously, but like the next generation below is already ready to go. Not that Fujibayashi's like some young guy, but there's a lot of that stuff that's already happened on the game side. And he's like, all right, Iwata was like, with the whole plan, like you said, the 10-year plan, Iwata looked at like what happened with the Wii U and like, okay, what can we do to sort of brace ourselves against future mistakes? And it's like, we got to take our IP and do a lot more with it. And this is all part of that plan.
Yep.
All right. Let's get. Oh, actually, we wondered earlier if the CMA and the EU were kind of biting back and forth a little bit. The CMA has responded on Twitter.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Let's fucking go. Here it is. Our response to the European Commission's announcement today. The UK, US, and European competition authorities are unanimous that this merger would harm competition in cloud gaming. The CMA concluded that cloud gaming needs to continue as a free competitive market to drive innovation and choice in this rapidly evolving sector. Microsoft's proposals, accepted by the European Commission today, would allow Microsoft to set the terms and conditions for this market for the next 10 years. They would replace a free, open, competitive market with one subject to ongoing regulation of the games Microsoft sells, the platforms to which it sells them, and the condition of the sales, and the conditions of the sales. This is one of the reasons the CMA's independent panel group rejected Microsoft's proposal and prevented this deal. While we recognize and respect that the European Commission is entitled to take a different view, the CMA stands by its decision. Yeah, it definitely seems like they are. I think there is a layer of politics happening with regulators that I was not aware of before this thing started, and it seems like they all want to be the big one throwing their weight around as like the authoritative regulator for these kinds of deals. And I do think that's been some of the motivation we've seen with the CMA. I think when it comes to the FTC, I think Lena Khan, or Lisa, I think she just is a true believer that she should be doing everything she can to stand in the way of these deals, even if that means like politically moving. It's like it's all to serve that goal of we want these deals to be under much more scrutiny than they've had before. But when it comes to the CMA versus EU, it seems like, yeah, they definitely are biting back and forth a little bit.
Very good. Continue beefing. I encourage it. Need my regulators to be thirsty on Twitter.
Love to see it. All right. PlayStation-backed Deviation Games has been hit with layoffs. This comes from Jordan Midler at VGC. PlayStation-backed studio Deviation Games has had as many as 90 members of its staff been laid off. Several now ex-employees of Deviation have announced their departure on social media, with software engineer Kyle Paris writing that my studio recently ran into a difficult situation and was forced to make a number of layoffs, which I was a part of. In September last year, one of Deviation Games' co-founders, Chief Creative Officer Jason Blundell, left the studio. The studio is developing an original IP, which will be published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Deviation was reportedly over 100 strong in 2021 when it signed the deal with Sony. At the time of the writing, the studio is not currently advertising any open roles. PlayStation is really at like high tide, low tide, back and forth with these kinds of announcements where, hey, we have this other studio that was in a similar situation of Deviation, and we are acquiring them. We're all in on what they're doing. And the Deviation is the exact opposite. It seems like the deal might be spoiling, and a lot of people are getting the brunt of that force there. Do you think this is just Sony being very hands-on with like trying to pick winners and losers among the games that it's working on?
Yeah, I wonder, this definitely seems to have some echoes with what's going on with, what is it? The Molasses Studio, like the CD Projekt owns, where it sounds like a project was rescoped or canceled. And we can't know for sure. I think in terms of the Molasses, it sounds like that was rescoped. And so they laid off a bunch of folks as they move forward with their version of that game that they're making in the Witcher universe. This has all the inklings of like, whatever they were working on hit a milestone and Sony said no, or it's rescoping or like starting from scratch. And it's like, if you're starting something back at like a pre-production phase, you probably don't need the height of production employees that you would need. And so that would end up gutting like a huge part of the studio as they move forward.
Yep. I think you're right. Let's hit this last one. And then there's a couple of stories that got announced separately. We'll get in there. Open Road's team completely separates from Fullbright. This comes from Jeffrey Rousseau at gamesindustry.biz. The Open Roads development team is no longer a part of the Fullbright game studio. As reported by Polygon, the collective, now known as the Open Roads team, will continue to work with publisher Annapurna Interactive. The split was announced in an update from Fullbright co-founder Gaynor. He said, after a great deal of consideration, it's just no longer Fullbright's place to represent Open Roads publicly going forward. It will be credited to the Open Roads team when it launches. The news comes nearly 2 years after Gaynor stepped down as the lead of the title, following complaints about his leadership and mistreatment of women. To kind of go back to that story a little bit, it did not rise to the level of doing anything illegal, but he was very belittling to a lot of the women on the team, and it was something that like everyone knew about, and it was very upsetting to everybody on the team. and he did step down. And since then, we haven't heard much from either Gainer or the studio. But this does seem to be like the final separation and everybody moving on from that situation, right?
It does. The thing that rubs me the wrong way about this is given Gainer's role in all this, the allegations made against him during the development of this, I wish the team that worked on the game was the ones that could have announced they were the ones taking ownership, as opposed to Gainer getting in front of this and announcing like, hey, I'm leaving. It's the Open Roads team, which just sounds like a temp title, as opposed to like, hey, they're forming under their own identity and here's their name. Like, maybe if these announcements had been joined together, like maybe I'd feel a little better about it. I don't know. Like, the whole thing feels a little gross and weird, and it's a little bit of Gainer gaming the system to get some headlines by announcing this, as opposed to allowing the folks who have taken this game or are taking the game to the finish line, allowing them to own that part of it. So I hope he becomes a better person and like is able to, he's worked on some games that I've liked and have meant a lot for me, but this particular way of like announcing this while also if you'd like to sign up for what is not mentioned here is like, because I read the thing and it's like, and also if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter to see what I'm up to in the future, it's like, come on, man. Like, come on. Shit's gross. Like, just like, I'm not saying you got to disappear for the rest of your life, but this is not the way to handle it.
Right. Yeah. When you are appearing as if you were trying to put over this other studio, and then it really comes back to be like, and my next game is going to be solo developed by me. And if you want more information, here's the newsletter. Yeah, you're right.
But here's that other one by the Open Roads team, whoever they are.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's weird. It's like, yeah, did they ask you never to say any of their names, or is that something? Is it like some weirdness still there? Obviously, there's still some weirdness.
No idea. But it definitely the vibes are bad. The vibes
are very bad. Absolutely. All right, couple other tidbits here that came in during the show. Wario64 hit me with this one. Hawken Reborn is coming to Steam Early Access. Do you remember Hawken, Patrick?
That's a mech game, right?
Yeah, it's the mech game that looked like kind of like it had Call of Duty movement. It was like an indie darling. It was like one of those early ones that was like came out as a bunch of GIFs, and everyone's like, "Oh, this looks good." And then people like played it. It was pretty good, but it never took off in the way that like it felt like it should. Well, it looks like, and they've tried to bring it back a bunch of times before. It looks like it's going to get one more chance here. I always love the idea of Hawken. It's coming May 17th. It's going to be free to play. It's going to have PvE stuff. All right, I guess we'll see.
May 17th. It's they saw Armored Core was announced, and it's like now is Hawken's time.
Yep,
now is Hawken's time. Time to coast in right before From Software releases the mech game to end all mech games.
Taking all the oxygen out of the room. Armored Core 6 doesn't stand a chance now. The other one, Amazon Games and Embracer Group's Middle Earth Enterprises, which I'm never going to get used to, they struck a deal for a new The Lord of the Rings MMO game. It's in early stages of production with Amazon Games, Orange County, which previously did New World for Amazon, and they will be leading development on it. It's going to come to PC and consoles. Patrick, Lotro is still out there running strong. People are still subscribed to Lord of the Rings Online, and now they're going to do another one.
I'll believe it when it ships.
When it comes to Amazon Games,
an MMO. Just MMOs in general, just good. Yeah, you can announce one. Let me know when I can play it. I feel like it's very easy to get excited about making an MMO. It seems much harder to ship them these days.
Yes, it does. All right, we got the poll question from Friday. Let's bring that up. What matters more to you in a handheld PC? Better performance or a more console-like experience? 59% said better performance. 41% said more console-like. I think that is, I think that's a pretty good split. But Patrick, I also think that is very much in a forced obsolescence sort of mindset of, I want the more power because I want the numbers to be bigger on the box. But once you start using these things, listen, I think the ROG Ally is something I'm very interested in. I want to mess around with it. That's what inspired this question. I think for most people, the way that the Steam Deck is set up, the way that the experience is sort of figured out and tested by the community, and then the community tools are integrated at a console-like level so that it just presents in the best way possible, it actually makes a huge difference to the Steam Deck being as good as it is. And the ROG Ally can get there, but with support from Asus, I think it's a little bit less likely than the way Valve's going to support the Steam Deck. I don't know, what do you think? Are you still a Steam Deck boy?
I am. It's funny because when I think for a lot of people, the arrival of the Steam Deck was like I'm tired of using my Switch. I need something a little more powerful, a little more versatile. Then the Steam Deck arrives. Then the Steam Deck proves out like, holy shit, there's like this whole other way we can be playing video games. And not that there weren't handheld computers before, but I think the Steam Deck sort of crystallized it as a market, and that's why we're seeing these other devices, both in cloud and in portable PC forms, really start to proliferate in the 2 years since the Steam Deck, or year and a half. And I find myself, I'm a big Steam Deck boy, but shit, I was like, oh, I'm not starting to think about the Steam Deck like I think about the Switch. Like, I need you to be a more powerful boy. Yep. I don't need you to run Jedi Survivor, but even I am like, gee, I don't think like Valve has been very pretty clear in communicating they are not going to do like a Switch 2 or a Steam Deck 2 until it is like a huge leap forward. Like, it is not something. Right. I was kind of hoping they were going to do it in more of a PC architecture,
even though like an iPhone sort of thing. Maybe not every year, but every 2 years is kind of makes sense.
Bump up the internals, and maybe that's what they'll do. But like, they've been pretty clear in their interviews. I've thought as clear as Valve gets of like, hey, it's not coming anytime soon. We're very happy with the Steam Deck as it is. We're working. We have all these other priorities. There will be another hardware, but like, don't anticipate. Like, don't feel like if you buy it now, you're going to get, mad that like a new one came out at the same price in 6 months. And so there's now this interesting market where it's like, I'm glad the Steam Deck exists. I'm going to keep using it all the time, but I'm increasingly looking at these other devices and like kind of waiting for the one that's just good enough, but is also powerful as hell, that I can run, some games on that the Steam Deck is going to fall out of favor for. Like, there's only so many tricks they can pull with like their Proton Linux stuff, where it's like, hey, the generation is moving along. Certain games, even indie ones, are going to start performing less well on the deck, and it'll continue to be a great box for 95% of things. Well, for that 5% of things, maybe I do want to go spend another $400-500 on something that, look, it might only run for an hour and a half, but that's fine. Maybe I only need the hour and a half. I don't use the Steam Deck anywhere but my house. Like, I'm okay being next to a battery station. Like it's meant for me to be on the couch while my kids are doing other things, and I can play games. And everyone's situation is different, but I would happily take a more powerful version of those, like as soon as humanly possible. But I love the fact that the other storefronts and emulators and all that stuff like are so neatly wound up, but all that stuff benefits the other devices. Like, all the work happening on the Steam Deck means that those other devices are going to get the kind of stuff as a result. And
it definitely does a little bit of a U-turn there as well, where anything that it comes from another company in the handheld gaming PC space, guess who's actually the prime beneficiary there? It's Valve and Steam.
Yep.
Because that's where most people are going to continue buying their games for those devices. So I wonder if there's like that incentive of making it fall up to the Steam Deck quickly. I bet they were like, let's wait and see. Let's see if these other companies that we know are in this space, or these other companies that could step into this space, if they sort of begin filling in some of the other some of that other room in the areas, so that, because we are taking a pretty hefty loss probably on the hardware. These things are expensive to produce, and we want to have aggressive pricing to establish the market. But the market's established, and yeah, we could introduce a Steam Deck 2, but they are going to be more expensive. And do we want to like lose some of that early momentum that we had from pricing so aggressively, or do we want to draw some of these other companies into a bit of a price war so that we can establish a baseline price that all these companies have to meet, and then go from there? And it seems like so far, if that was their strategy, it is working out beautifully. And I think this is a substantial, established new market. Compared to console gaming, mobile gaming, PC gaming, and handheld PC gaming, it is going to be something that stands along all sides, also all of those, I believe.
Yeah, it rules. Like, I literally could not. It's what I've wanted for years. Especially once I had kids, it was just like the Switch proved out. It's like, oh shit, this is how I want to play 99% of my video games, and the Switch was not going to provide that. And like the Steam Deck and now everything surrounding it is just like, this is what I want. Like, just give me more of these, and I will. Like, if I could sign up for a subscription service that it's like, I'll just pay you, people sign up for like the iPhone ones, like give me the new iPhone every year. Like, I don't need that. No way. I need the new, more powerful, like handheld PC device. And like, I will be very, very happy.
All right, new poll question. After spending some time with it, how do you rate Tears of the Kingdom so far? A, B, C, D, or F? We will put that up on the YouTube channel. You can vote for it there. That it was a test. It seems to be working pretty good. Everyone seems to be like it. You can go ahead and vote for that here pretty soon. I think Jan's going to get it posted. In the meantime, though, Patrick, what do you got going on? Where can people find you? What's happening in the life of Patrick Klepek?
Well, until June 2nd, Waypoint does continue to exist. Vice has terminated our positions and is closing out Waypoint and everything associated with it on June 2nd. But we have a couple more weeks where we are riding out the layoff vibes. If you want to listen to a podcast that has people going through exit interviews and then recording to talk about it and figuring out what can we say without losing our severance. Let's find out and begin testing the waters. You can find that over at Waypoint, Waypoint Radio, over at waypoint.vice.com. Personally, I'm still figuring out a lot of what's happening after June 2nd. One of those things that I have not worked out all the details on, but it's something I'm going to be putting a lot of energy and effort to. If you go to patrickklepek.substack.com, I am going to be launching sort of a newsletter that focuses pretty exclusively on the intersection of sort of parenting in video games. The idea is that I am a longtime video game reporter and a 6-year amateur parent, and I feel like a lot of times there are things I'm thinking about, talking about that don't really fit into sort of the stuff that would appear on Waypoint, and I don't really have other places to really pitch it to. And so my thought is I think there are a lot of people in that same boat that have a lot of questions about games, like things like screen time and like community standards on Roblox and one of the big piece I'm working on to sort of launch the Substack around is essentially what happened when my child was socially pressured into playing Roblox for the first time, and then I was forced to deal with all the consequences like microtransactions, and talking to a lot of parents about those stresses and how they've dealt with it with their kids. And so my hope is that there will be an audience for that, and you can sign up to hear more about that and potentially show interest in that just personally or even financially over at patrickklepek.substack.com, and there'll hopefully be more concrete details on that just by June 2nd.
Patrick, I gotta say, I really loved Waypoint. You guys did awesome work. I say that and it's like, I love the people that work at Waypoint, but there is something to be said about building a brand that people can sort of attach their identity to a little bit, and you guys did a really excellent job of that, of making people feel like they had a home for the way that they talk about video games, and it was just really well done, and it's something you guys should be proud of forever. Just really great work over there. And wherever you guys go next, you guys are going to continue doing great work. But I think Waypoint was very special. You guys did a really good job. So I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, thank you. It's I've been very fortunate it's very funny to be on here talking about that at the place that I was at not long before all that. And the genesis of Waypoint is very much burned out of our both Austin Walker and I's time at Giant Bomb. We kind of came up with the idea for what would be Waypoint out of our experiences there. And so, the best thing, to be part of something that people cared about is a very special thing. I have been, at places where I joined things that people already cared about to help build and be central to a place that people cared about is special all on its own. So the Giant Bomb audience was there from day one. They were, we had a lot of people that came over and supported us, continue to support us. And so Waypoint doesn't exist without Giant Bomb, does not exist without the Giant Bomb audience over all these years. And so I appreciate the kind sentiments, and I don't think you'll get rid of me that easily, internet. I've done this for too long, and while selling out is maybe tempting, just what if I didn't?
Right. It's I know exactly how you feel. What if you didn't? What if you just kept going and see if you could dig a little bit deeper?
Look, Vice, I just want to say, people have meddled with getting rid of me in the past, and it has not worked out for them financially. I have no strings to pull. I'm just saying, look at the evidence.
Yep. Just look at
the history.
Look at the dubs, look at the L's, and see what happened. There's a record there. All right. We'll get to the poll question. Wednesday, excuse me. We have the Bombcast tomorrow. I'm going to go into a meeting, figure out a whole bunch of stuff. SGF planning is taking up a lot of my time. We're going to be doing a lot of that. But we should have a Blight Club this week. We should have voicemail dump truck and all that stuff. I have an idea for a dump truck. We'll see if we can make that happen. In the meantime, though, Patrick, thank you so much for talking with me about video games today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.